We are starting 2026 off with a bang by inviting back past guest Christina Alisea. Part of the reason that Christina's here chatting with us is to talk about her past experience with egg donation. But we're also here to talk about her role with Everie as a program analyst and the way that Everie approaches egg donation and how important and valuable it is for donors to be recognized and seen so that identities are known. And this is not just for the donor, but it is for the children who grow up as a result of these donations. This conversation is deeply profound and moving. You don't want to miss even a moment. Welcome to the Becoming Baby Ready podcast, your podcast for queer family planning. My name is Sam, and throughout this podcast, you'll hear me have conversations with professionals who work alongside people who want to start and grow their families, as well as parents of intentionally created families. Everyone I speak to identifies as being part of the 2S LGBTQIA+ community. This is your opportunity to learn answers to questions you didn't even know you had. Welcome, everyone. I am really excited to welcome someone back who has been a guest on this podcast before, back in the very beginning, but she's in a new role now, and I want to have an opportunity for you to learn about all the things that she has done and does in her life. So without further ado, welcome Christina Alisea. Please tell everyone who you are and why you're here on the Becoming Baby Ready podcast.
Thank you so much, Sam, for the introduction or reintroduction. It's an honor to be back and truly feels like a full circle moment to be here again. Some of you may remember, as Sam mentioned, from my last appearance on Baby Ready, I was working clinic side, managing an egg donor program while simultaneously walking my own egg donation journey. And that in and of itself, that alone gave me a rare and powerful dual perspective. And a lot has happened since then, also, as Sam has mentioned. So before we dive in, for those of you who may not know, I work in the wonderful world of third-party reproduction. So any form of family building that involves the collaboration with an egg donor, gestational surrogate, or sperm donor. The last time I was on the show, I was working at a fertility clinic where, as I mentioned, at the time I was managing an in-house egg donor program. And at the same time, I was undergoing my own egg donation journey. At that point, it was my third donation of 5 that I've completed since then, my most recent being just this past May.
Yay.
But with that particular donation, it was unique in that it was a fully open ID match with a same-sex male couple. So again, another moment as a lesbian myself where my whole world was coming full circle. I remember saying at the time that it felt like my world was coming together in the most meaningful way possible, not just professionally, but personally, ethically, and emotionally. What I didn't know then was just how far that echo would travel.
Wow, that's it. And it has. You've done 2 since that time.
Yes.
And were they both open ID donor processes as well?
So one was legally known, the other was still anonymous or de-identified. We don't really like to use the word anonymous these days because
Right.
there's no 100% guarantee to anonymity,
Right.
given the DNA ancestry testing, AI technology, photo identifying technology. There's just no one way to ever guarantee 100% anonymity. So, yes, 2
For sure.
more. One was legally known in that we never met, but intended parents have my information should they ever want to reach out for any reason. This one was the only match that I've had that was fully known, and with that donation, it was different from the very beginning. It wasn't just a medical process. It wasn't just a timeline or a protocol. It was a
Mhm.
relationship that was built on intention, vulnerability, trust. They weren't just hopeful parents. They were 2 men who had fought quietly and loudly for the chance to build a family in a world that hasn't always made that easy.
Right.
And I wasn't just a donor anymore. I was a witness to their becoming. And since that donation, they've gone on to have their first child, a baby
Yay.
boy. And that's where it gets really emotional for me. I wasn't just informed of his birth, I was invited into their lives.
Oh, wow.
Yes, so had the honor of attending the baby shower. I met both of their families. I was invited to their son's first birthday.
Mm.
I watched grandparents cry. I watched chosen family celebrate, and I watched love grow and multiply. And at that baby shower, they gave me something that I will carry for the rest of my life. And essentially, they gifted me a wind chime. And
Oh,
on the chime itself, on one side, it reads, and I've got some notes here, so I'm going to read because I couldn't
yeah,
memorize it all.
fair.
But it says, forever grateful, an echo of the heart. And on the other side, it says, kindness is a gift to be shared and is so heart and so is a heartfelt thank you. But it was the box. The message on the box is what stopped me in my tracks entirely. And it says, excuse me if I get a little emotional reading it, but it says, forever grateful. We remember with gratitude those who have helped us along the way. Just as kindness is a gift to be shared, so is a heartfelt thank you. May the music of the chimes feel like an echo of your heart, reminding you of the difference you made in my life. Thank you.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. There are the tears, you know.
Sorry to do it to you, Sam. Sorry, not sorry. They're good tears,
Right?
happy tears.
Exactly. It, I think that that's a powerful thing, though, for them to honor and gift you with, because there's a lot of people who look at surrogacy, egg donation, sperm donation
Mhm.
as transactional, and they don't.
Exactly.
And to be fair, there's less involved with someone doing sperm donation than there is with someone doing egg donation. But for many people, that doesn't make it any less intentional in that you're taking that time, you're making that effort, you're putting those hormones into your body so that you can do that for someone or some people. And so for them to acknowledge that it wasn't just a simple thing that you did,
Right.
that's enormous and so powerful. And what a lesson I think many of the uneducated around us could learn from that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've worked in this field long enough to know how rare that level of acknowledgement is.
Mhm.
Not because people aren't grateful,
No.
but because donation is often treated as, like you said, transactional,
Mhm.
clinical, quiet. This was not quiet.
Right.
This was seen, and standing there holding that chime, I felt something shift inside me.
Yeah.
The ART world, we talk a lot about outcomes, cycles, success rates, timelines, embryos. What we don't always talk about enough is legacy.
Right.
That wind chime represented just that
Yeah.
legacy.
Yeah.
It represented a child who will grow up knowing where he came from. It represented parents who never had to hide his story. It represented me, a donor who
Mhm.
wasn't erased once the cycle was complete.
Right.
And for me, someone who had spent years inside clinics watching how systems are built, it made something painfully clear. Open, ethical, identity affirming donation isn't just a quote unquote nice to have,
Mhm.
it's foundational.
Yep.
That moment confirmed something I had already felt but hadn't yet named. It didn't just, I didn't want to just work in this field. I
Mhm.
wanted to help reshape it. That experience heavily influenced my decision to join Everie. Everie's mission is simple, but incredibly bold.
Mhm.
We joke all the time that we may have been a little bit ahead of our time, but it's, as I said, it's simple but incredibly bold.
Mhm.
And it is, we believe that everybody should have the choice to know their origin.
Mhm.
When I read that for the first time, it felt like language had finally caught up to what I already knew in my heart.
Right. Yeah.
I joined Every initially as the client services manager. And for the first 2 years of my role, I was deeply involved in building the foundation of our recipient parent intake and matching process. We weren't just creating workflows, we were creating guardrails. How
Mm,
do we protect donors? How do we empower recipient parents? How do we ensure children are centered in ethical decision making before they're even born?
right.
I helped establish systems that balanced empathy with structure, choice with accountability, and transparency with care.
Okay.
And I'm incredibly proud of that work. Recently, I
Hmm.
transitioned to a program analyst role. And that shift has marked a new chapter indeed. And now I focus my focus is high level global oversight of business operations and sales through data analysis. I look at patterns, trends, gaps, opportunities, and here's the thing. Data tells stories too. And that was something that was hard for me to grasp at first because I'm really not a numbers person, but I've got excuse my language, kick-ass boss who really turned me into a little data analyst. And it tells us who's being served, who's being left out, where systems are working, where they aren't. And this role allows me to advocate at scale to translate
Okay.
human experience into operational change and to make sure that ethics aren't just values, but measurable commitments.
Do you think that some of these changes for the better, with so much transparency being laid out, comes as a result of more queer individuals and couples reaching out to reproductive endocrinologists, fertility clinics, donor programs to create their families? And we're loud and proud about how we make our families because we have to be, because we have to ask the questions, we have to get the answers, we have to communicate with other people everywhere. We don't just happen to find ourselves pregnant, whereby prior to there being so much openness around queer family building, these services were utilized by people who were embarrassed and ashamed about the fact that they weren't being successful creating their
Mhm.
family genetically themselves in their cisgendered heterosexual relationships. So we kept everything kind of quietly packaged down so as not to shine a light on things, so as not to embarrass people to it, so as not to make people feel ashamed that their bodies didn't respond and react and behave the way that they felt like they quote unquote should.
Absolutely.
Is that a piece of it?
Absolutely. I would say historically, gaining access to fertility care has proven to be difficult, but especially for those of us within the community and especially in states who have yet to recognize same-sex relationships as a fertility diagnosis. And I would say that we're seeing we're seeing that shift entirely. I would say that currently at least 75% of our client base are same-sex individuals or, those that are in the LGBTQ plus community.
Right.
So absolutely, absolutely. I would say that that's where why we're seeing some of that shift today.
And so if your clients are part of the community, are your donors primarily part of the community as well?
And I wouldn't say they're primarily part of the community, but we definitely have donors who are. Absolutely.
I think in times gone past, I think about donors as being someone who donates and whatever they're donating, whether it's sperm or egg in this case,
Mhm.
and we can get to embryos later on, but just the individual gametes, sperm and eggs. I think about them as being sort of donated and then put in this freezer for someone to say, "Oh, that's the one I want out of the catalog." They're pulled out, and the fertilization process happens. Is that less common when it's a known donor system? Is it more that people are saying, "Oh no, this is the individual that I want. I would like them to harvest their eggs or their sperm for me for this process."
I would say absolutely. With this transition to this more open landscape,
Hmm.
it's becoming more personal. And I mean, it's always been a matter of recipient parents coming browsing the database and really identifying that profile that resonates with them, whether it be physical characteristics, personality traits, educational, achievements. whatever it is that makes that profile resonate. But as we're shifting into this more open landscape, it's making things a lot more personal. Their choices are being made with a lot more intention.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, that's not the only thing that's shifted. I mean, my work at Everie has inspired another major pivot. When I first began on this journey, I began on a nursing pathway. But that has recently, that major pivot being my education,
Hmm.
because and I started on that nursing pathway because I wanted to care for people more directly. And that instinct is still very much alive.
Hmm.
But I realized something much more important in all of this is that systems care for people too. And
Hmm.
so I shifted to a business pathway. I recently obtained my business administration certification, and I'll soon be starting my combined bachelor's and MBA program with a focus in healthcare management. And my goal
Nice.
is to sit at tables where decisions are being made and make sure that lived experiences are represented there. Especially not just for women navigating reproductive care, donors whose stories deserve dignity,
Hmm.
children who deserve truth, but especially for the LGBTQ plus community. Um, as I mentioned earlier, historically, access to fertility care has always been difficult. We're
Hmm.
seeing that start to shift now, which is great, but I'd love to see that shift more for the community. And I'd love even more so to be have some type of impact in all of that. That windshield still hangs in my home. I've got the box right behind me on the bookshelf, and I've got the wind chime on my balcony. And when it rings, that when I least expect it, I'm reminded of this work and why it matters so much. And that kindness ripples and transparency heals, and that being known changes everything, truly known. And I hope to continue making a lasting impact in this field by advocating for systems rooted in choice, ethics, and humanity. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about science. It's about stories, and some echoes last forever.
Yeah.
So thank you, Sam, for letting me share mine.
Oh, I love that. I really love that. Can you give us an idea? Let's say somebody is, we've got a couple. They've decided they're starting down this path and they've heard of Every, and so they reach out. What
Mhm.
happens? Like can you walk me through what the process is like when they contact you? Do they go to a fertility clinic first or a surrogacy agency first? Do they reach out to you first? What happens?
So those are all interesting questions because depending on who you ask, you're always going to get somewhat of a different answer,
Sure.
right? So at all times, we are rooted in whatever's most aligned to your journey, right? So ideally, it is best to be established with a clinic so that you can have all the necessary testing completed before you're identifying a donor.
Right.
But it's not entirely necessary, right? At the end of the day, we all know that this is a very vulnerable journey. And the donor's profile is what's really going to, it's the donor that drives all of this. And a recipient parent is looking for their ideal donor, right?
Right.
And whatever is going to align to their journey. And so you don't necessarily have to be set up with a clinic in the initial stages. We can always guide you and direct you to those that we have partnered with and collaborated with in the past. Depending on what your needs are. If you're looking for a clinic that's local to you, if you're an international patient and you're just looking for, that clinic that we've got that history with, we can, there's never a 100% guarantee, but we can do our best to ensure some level of success, right, as you're navigating this path.
Right.
And so essentially, when a recipient parent, registers for our database, they're automatically going to be assigned a client, what we call a client services coordinator. They're
Okay.
going to walk you through the entire matching process, whether it be, a fresh donation or a frozen match. And so you're essentially starting with that first step of identifying donor profiles that really resonate with you.
Hmm.
And at that point, let's say you are established with the clinic, we have no financial commitment up front from any of our recipient parents. So you identify a donor, you want her records reviewed by your clinic. You go ahead and we're going to reserve that profile for you as a courtesy for up to a week while we get records over to your clinic, get everything reviewed. They're confirming the key factor in all this is going to be confirming that genetic compatibility, right?
Right.
So that carrier screening that you have, your donor has a similar screening. It might be a different panel, and that's why that part is such a key factor in all of this, is
Hmm.
that we want to ensure that there's no overlap and anything that you are a positive carrier of, your donor's been screened for and vice versa.
Right.
And then you've got that genetic counseling to go through all of the risks and that are associated. And essentially, that's going to be, in my opinion, the most important part of this journey is
Hmm.
identifying that donor that you are genetically compatible with. Genetic risk might, needs to be low. From that point, once we've got that clinical clearance, we then ask you, to finalize the donation arrangement type that you'd be interested in, whether that be fully open ID, semi-open ID, or ID release. So we no longer, as of 2025, we no longer offer de-identified or that quote unquote anonymous, right?
Right.
Just because recent the legislatures that have been passed in Colorado that have banned it.
Hmm.
We have a feeling that's going to be happening in Oregon as well, and we just have a feeling that's the direction the industry is headed in as a
Exactly.
whole. And so I know that that kind of language and that kind of messaging can be very intimidating to recipient parents.
Hmm.
However, it's important to understand that with ID release, there is still no exchanging of information. It's still technically de-identified because again, there's no exchange of that information. You're not meeting your donor. No contact information is being exchanged. All that allows is that once your child is of legal consenting age, should it be disclosed to them that they were conceived via egg donation, they then have, or they figure it out some way on their
Hmm.
own, because again, no 100% guarantee to anonymity. They then have the capability to come back to us, reach out to us, and obtain that donor's information. Now, with the understanding that there is no guarantee, even at that stage, that contact or relationship are going to be established, but it offers access to more information for
Sure.
everyone involved. It gives the donor some autonomy in
Hmm.
the matches that she's moving forward with, and it gives recipient parents and the donor conceived community access to more information.
Hold on for just a moment. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Rowan Jete Knox. My partner Danny Gaeta and I were on the Becoming Baby Ready podcast this past fall, talking about our new baby, an inclusive, community-driven coffee shop and wine bar we're opening. It's called Understory, and it's situated in the heart of Toronto's LGBTQ plus village. Well, after 9 long months of building out this dream, and no, I'm not kidding, it's really been 9 months, I'm thrilled to tell you our doors will be opening this month, and we can't wait to welcome you there. So I hope to see you near the end of January, Toronto. Check out understorycafe.com and our socials for updates.
Once you've identified your donation arrangement type, your match will be presented to your donor. She then has a certain amount of time to reach back out to us, let us know that she's ready to proceed with the match. And then from that point, it really depends. If you're proceeding with a fresh donation arrangement, you'll then get transitioned to what we call our program coordination team. Now that assigned coordinator is going to oversee the legal process, the medical screening, and the retrieval cycle. They're going to coordinate all those steps in collaboration with your clinic. And if it's a frozen donor cycle, we then begin arranging shipment coordination. Now that is if you don't have a legal contract in place. Legal contracts are required with fully open and semi-open ID arrangements, but with ID release, where there's none of that exchanging of contact information or
Hmm.
identifying information, we really leave it up to our recipient parents to decide if they want to proceed with that legal contract in place, understanding that, it's important to understand your parentage rights state by state. And if you are proceeding with a legal agreement, that your attorney be affiliated with Quad A. That is a requirement of ours. And if you don't have an attorney, we are partnered with attorneys to set you up
Okay.
with. And from that point, then if there that le once that legal contract is in place, we would arrange shipment coordination to your clinic.
You've brought something up that I don't I look at all of this from the lens of having adult grown children. So I look back on all of this kind of decision making, and certainly
Mhm.
when my wife and I were each having children many, many years ago, the world was a different place,
Mhm.
and everything was closed or
Right.
anonymous. On paper, it was anonymous.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the worries that I wonder if parents or prospective parents still have, but certainly it was a worry that was voiced 20 years ago. If we don't do it as an anonymous donation, then one, will the donor want to have more of a role in my family's life than I'm comfortable with? And what are my legal rights as a non-bio parent in all of that? But I'm gonna say that in our family, at least, it's not. We're worried that the kid. People always say, "Well, they're going to want to know. They're going to
Right.
want to know where they came from," and certainly that may still come up, but
Right.
it hasn't thus far with adult children come up where they're saying, I think I want to find out more.
Mhm.
And it's but I think that that's a piece that a lot of people are worried about,
Right.
especially when it comes to non-bio parents in
Absolutely. Yeah,
the whole
absolutely.
family structure.
Yeah, no, my favorite thing to outline for recipient parents when I meet with them and when we're having these conversations and issues like and concerns like this do come up is that 9 times out of 10, 10 times out of 10, honestly, I can say confidently, hand over heart, your donor's concerned about the same thing.
Right,
What do I do if these parents approach me or this child approaches me and wants, more a level of more involvement than I'm willing to. The donor 10 times out of 10 has that same concern.
sure.
And so, I speak from my own experience in that I'm actively involved in, with my same-sex male couple that I matched with and very actively involved, and they have left it open to explain to their son, how he was conceived and leaving it
Right,
up to him to decide what level of relationship he wants to have with myself or their surrogate. And from my own experience, I don't look at it as that is, yes, biologically, that is an offspring of mine.
right,
However, I'm not the parent. I'm
right,
not mommy, right?
right.
I'm not the one raising that child. They are.
Yeah,
I look at my role as more of that of an auntie figure,
sure.
really, in that aspect. And if that's the type of relationship he'd want to have, I'd absolutely be open to that. Um, but it's not something that's those concerns are not concerns that have come to fruition in my experience.
Hmm.
And for those recipient parents who do have those concerns and are having a really hard time, conceptualizing this open landscape. We have resources. We are partnered with the Center for Family Building, who offers, we offer 1 year memberships for free to those that are interested in their services. Should they choose to pay for an annual membership following that 1 year free membership, they can absolutely choose to do that. But they offer all sorts of, counseling resources. And so there are all sorts of Facebook groups and for intended parents and all sorts of resources that we can offer to those intended parents who are really having a hard time conceptualizing that. Because again, we understand that just as new as this is to them, it's new to us as a field, and it's new to the donors that we're bringing into our program. And all of our donors are counseled to understand the same things, is that you are don't have any legal rights to these children. You don't have any obligation to them, whether it be emotionally or financially. And our donors express the same concerns, so they're counseled to understand the same things.
Yeah. It's, I mean, it is a mind game sometimes, right? It's got to
Absolutely.
be.
Absolutely. I think that the most important factor in all this, at least for me, is that, again, that genetic piece, that medical piece, right? Historically, it's sometimes been a challenge to keep up with every donor and every match that a donor has had. And how do we get all of these medical and lifestyle updates to these recipient parents? And that's the one of my favorite aspects of Everie's programs is that regardless of the donation arrangement, regardless of the donation type, every donor that matches with the recipient parent gets registered into the secure database called EDC Nexus. And every recipient parent that she matches with gets linked to her as well through that same platform. And then she's prompted every 2 years to go in and enter any medical and lifestyle updates that have happened over the course of these last 2 years. And it goes to every single recipient parent she's matched with simultaneously. And I think that in conceptualizing this open landscape, it's also important to understand that that is equally as important is
Absolutely.
is those genetic and those medical family history updates and lifestyle updates. And so I would say that those would be the two most important aspects as a one day recipient parent who's going to have to utilize a sperm donor myself. Um, I would say those are the two most important factors is understanding that open concept, that open ID donation arrangement, what that means,
Mhm.
and what type of arrangement is going to be the most aligned to your journey,
Mhm.
with the understanding that again, even if you don't intend to disclose, there's no guarantee that your child won't figure it out one day on their own. And recent studies and a lot of the recent research has indicated that it's better to disclose, and it's better to disclose, as
Early.
early on as is comfortable for you and your
Sure.
family.
And there are so many, I mean, there are so many books. Listeners of the podcast know that I've had authors on the show talking about the books that they've written about being donor conceived and just starting the building block conversations with children from a very young age. It's almost like I say, when you're doing diaper changes, start naming body parts. Well, when we're
Mhm.
starting to talk about daddy and dada, then let's talk about, eggs and like talk about it
Right.
all in a kind of just a conversational way because it makes the conversation easier later on, right?
Right. Absolutely. And especially in the LGBTQ community, we don't have the option to not
Not just
disclose,
it's true.
right?
Yeah,
Children are going to figure out one way or another that there was this third party that was involved,
somehow.
at
Yep.
some point. And so, access to more information earlier on, in my opinion, again, as not just somebody as a professional in the field, but as someone who will have this lived experience.
Mhm.
We're already starting, the conversations, my partner and I, of getting this process initiated. That's coming from someone with lived experience, not
Yeah.
just a professional in the field.
Yeah. With EDC Nexus, do they have to also update their physical whereabouts in the world so that if parents want to make communication, they can, or is it just that they have to update their medical health records? I mean, the other part of it is, I mean, I think about you, having done 5 rounds of retrievals before for people, and the person you were when you prepared to do your first and what you knew about your family medical history with the
Right.
first one, that just evolves, right? The things we don't know are not things that we're trying to hide necessarily.
Right.
But if you're 21, you only know this much about your family medical history, and then
Yeah.
over the course of several Thanksgiving dinners or whatever, you
Yep.
you learn you learn about, oh, great Aunt Bertha and her
Yeah.
kids, and all these other things start to come out that we don't, as we get older, we figure it out.
Yeah, yeah, no, the donors aren't obligated to update their physical location within the platform. All of that does come through us directly because, again, it's all dependent on the level of openness.
Right,
And so there's some information that may not have been disclosed. So that type of information isn't exchanged via the platform
right,
unless it was a fully open ID donation arrangement and we've got the capability to toggle on the communication via the platform. So this way, if there's a change of phone number, a change of email address, whatever the case, you lose access to something, you at least have that platform where you can
right.
continue communications. That's
Yes,
only going to be on the fully open ID level.
right,
There are certain other pieces of information that have to come directly through us as the agency, but that family history, that medical history, and all those lifestyle updates, there's even an option for them to upload photos so that you can see how a donor changes physically throughout the course of her life as well.
Excellent. Now, you work and have worked a lot with egg donation. Everie, though, does all donations, do they not? Or is
No,
it
just egg donation.
just
Yeah.
egg?
Yeah.
Excellent. That's because that's important to know because I can imagine people listening are like, okay, well, I like the ethics of this organization. I'm going to reach out. And then like, sorry, it's not the way, not the dynamic of the people we're looking for at this time.
Yeah.
Are there plans to expand beyond that, or do you have a sister organization that you refer out to for those who are looking for sperm or embryo donations?
Yeah, so we're actually part of the broader North Star Fertility Network. And we do have we have a couple of sister agencies. So we've got Circle Surrogacy is one of our sister surrogacy agencies. We have Growing Generations. They're also a surrogacy industry that is currently working on, I don't know off the top of my head if they're working on rolling out the sperm donation program or if it's already been launched, but they're another option. And then Donor Concierge. They are a concierge service that has access to over 100 databases that can help connect you to all of the right agencies that are aligned again to your journey and what you're looking for.
And I ask that because there are donor places on every corner. I mean, there's not, but
Yeah.
it feels like there's a lot and more and more and
Right.
more in the last couple of years, good, bad, and otherwise.
Yeah.
But Everie has such a strong mandate to behave ethically and to
Mhm.
present with a strong moral compass, leaning towards balancing the rights of all parties to make sure
Involved.
that everything comes out just so beautifully cohesive and
Mhm.
everyone has a positive experience that I can't imagine that you are recommending other agencies and you're like, oh, I haven't really looked into their business practices.
Right.
So
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, not here.
no, well, because there are a lot of places you can go internationally and
Mhm.
within the US or within Canada
Right. Yeah.
to just start the process. So
Right.
what you're offering is really unique. There's not a lot of other. I do know of a sperm donor organization that works to function in a very similar capacity, and they only do known donor or
Yeah,
open
I think
ID.
I know who you're talking about. They're fairly
Yes.
new to the industry, but no, absolutely 100%. You hit the nail on the head. There is even today, as much as we're talking about doing everything from an ethical standpoint, there's still little regulation with our
Mm,
small but mighty field.
yeah,
And so I would say that between the United States and Canada would be in my opinion, the most regulated. And so we never refer anybody internationally. We don't work with international donors, and we won't send our donors to be cycled internationally anywhere, just because of that level of regulation within
right.
the field here in the States and within Canada. And
We're going to come back to that. You can
yeah,
finish your thought, but I want to come back to that because cycled internationally is something that people don't know about. So, but
yeah,
finish your thought.
absolutely. Yeah, no, so that's just essentially my thought in and of itself is that there is such little regulation within the field as a whole
Hmm.
that we keep everything here in the States, and we're never going to recommend anybody go, definitely not internationally, but
Hmm.
also anywhere within the States where we don't have much familiarity with a program. And I mean, the good thing about most of the agencies within the field here in the States, and I'm sure many other, countries, but I'm not really familiar or well
Sure,
versed in any of
sure,
those.
fair.
But what I can say is that within the States, most of the agencies and clinics that I've worked with or worked in, you're dealing with not just experts within the field, but someone or some people or a group of people that have their own lived experiences,
Mhm.
whether or not they were a parent through, third party reproduction, whether they were a donor or a surrogate themselves. So you're always going to have that personal touch
Yeah,
because it's not just somebody who's worked in the industry for years and they have that professional experience, but they've lived through it themselves.
yeah. A lot of people don't know that if a donor, and I'm more familiar with it happening with sperm donors. I don't know that it happens with egg donors, but if someone has had as many births with an organization as they're allowed to have with that particular, then oftentimes that sperm is sent internationally. What did you call that?
So when they're cycling internationally?
Yes, when they're cycling
Yeah.
internationally. So can you describe cycling internationally a little bit more for people? And does it happen in all donation areas, or is it really primarily with sperm donation?
I would say it is, I've heard, I don't have any personal experience. I don't have much personal experience to really talk much to the topic, but I've heard that it happens a lot more with sperm donation,
Mhm.
but it happens a lot with egg donation as well. I mean, again, there's not as many regulations and guardrails in place as there are here in the States,
Mhm.
but it tends to be more cost effective. And that's where recipient parents are really drawn to that avenue of,
Right.
going internationally, going elsewhere because, and I get it. And that's where, again, going to circle back to where I hope to make more of an impact within the field because again, that access to fertility care is so crucial. That's why you're getting a lot of these recipient parents that are choosing the international route where there isn't as much regulation. There's certainly not as much guarantee of success. And then you're still out all of this money and having to
Right.
reinvest. And I will say that in my experience, especially within IVF clinics and just medical clinics as a whole, because I wasn't always in fertility clinics, I started in internal medicine. One of the key parts of medical benefits and fertility benefits is not just confirming that you have the benefit for coverage. It's ensuring that you also meet the eligibility criteria to utilize that benefit. And that's something that's so important that not everybody is aware of.
Right.
So I would say that if there's one thing that I want anyone to take away from any of this, other than the open ID landscape and being ethical and intentional in your donation arrangements, it's understanding your fertility benefits and not just understanding what benefits you have, but ensuring you meet the criteria, the eligibility criteria.
There's a lot of people I speak with who assume because they're same sex and therefore obviously not able to conceive a child on their own, that they must meet the requirements.
Mhm.
And that is not the case in
Right.
the overwhelming majority, with the overwhelming
Right.
majority of insurance companies. You still have to prove that you've been trying
Right.
before.
Right. I'm like, and you know what's funny is that that's what my fertility benefit outlines is that I have to have some sort of documentation of a fertility diagnosis that I've been trying for, I believe it's something like at a minimum of 6 months. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, well, will you explain to me how I, as a lesbian, can prove to you that I've been trying naturally for 6 months? And
Yeah.
let's go from there. You explain to me because,
It doesn't make sense. It
right.
really doesn't make sense, but I mean, it is what it is. Are there any other key pieces of wisdom that you were hoping to share with me and my listeners today?
I would say that right there was that was one
Yes.
of I knew that I wanted to touch on that
Yeah.
before ending this recording today was ensuring that I mentioned that as we're trying to make an impact on recipient parents gaining more access
Mhm.
to care.
Yeah.
That would be the most crucial, in my opinion, is before you start getting so mentally and emotionally invested, right? Because this isn't as much as it is a
It is.
financial investment, it is an emotional investment. Understand your benefits, understand all of the financial aspects. If
Yeah.
you need to work with a third party agency, understand not just the cost of that agency, have a well-rounded understanding of your fertility benefits, your clinic costs, because the clinic costs are always going to be separate from that of the agency costs. They're
Mm.
completely separate. So they don't intertwine with one another. They're completely separate entities. And so you're going to be paying two different sets of costs. So understand the cost, both clinic side, agency side, what your fertility benefits are, what's included, what's not, and what is the eligibility criteria, and
Mhm.
make sure that you meet it in order to utilize that benefit.
Yeah. Excellent. I'm so grateful that you have made the time to come and talk to me and my listeners about where you are these days and what you're doing. And my hope is that when you are a parent, because you've said you're starting to have that conversation, that whenever that happens down the road, you'll come back and talk about your lived experience through that part of the process too.
Absolutely. I would be honored. You've been so wonderful to work with, Sam. I would be honored to return once we've gotten through the leg of that part of our journey.
Yeah. And it may happen tomorrow and it may happen in 5 years and one never knows, right? That's the beauty of all of it. Nothing happens on
Right.
on a schedule that anyone prescribes.
Right. Exactly.
Excellent. Thanks so very much for taking the time to chat with me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to return to the show.
Mine too. As a queer individual with colonial lineage, I want to first acknowledge the land upon which I live and work. Being from what is now known as Burlington, Ontario, I recognize the original ancestry of these lands as they span from Lake Ontario to the Niagara Escarpment and beyond. These lands are steeped in Indigenous history that benefits my community every day. The territory is mutually covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Iroquois Confederacy, the Ojibwe, and other allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. I would like to acknowledge that the land on which I stand is part of the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. The land dictates everything about our ways of being. Particularly, the land teaches us about fluidity. Concepts of the binary system and heteropatriarchy were imposed by the colonials who were, at the same time, removing children from their homes, families, and all that was familiar to them. These same children were divided by the only two prescribed binaries recognized by the settlers, and they were forced to conform to a performative, gendered falsehood. The land doesn't operate under binary thinking. It is diverse, complex, and unpredictable at times. Rather, the land holds us and all of our remarkable paths and identities. Every organism and spirit has a purpose. It is from this understanding that I strive to live and grow. Thank you for joining me today on the Becoming Baby Ready podcast. If you have a story that you'd like to share, or you know someone who might, if you're a professional who works in the capacity of helping people start and grow their families, and you identify as being a part of the 2S LGBTQIA plus community yourself, then please don't hesitate to reach out. We always have room for more stories to share, and there's always more learning to do.